Alright, so this episode, at least in terms of the topics that I'm supposed to be discussing, actually seems particularly linear. Like, unlike the other one where everything seemed a bit jumbled up, this one at least has a little bit of a flow to it. It's just that I don't have a proper way to describe everything, so let me see. This episode is going to be about checks and balances, because I've got some in-relationship checks, I have some pre-engagement checks, and I have some pre-marriage checks. And also I have some shit that I need to say about nice guys, which I'm not entirely sure of, but, I just kind of have to say it because, some babe was saying some shit. But all in all, I have a pretty well-packed episode for y'all. But before I can get into any of the things that I've just mentioned, we need to talk about the popular streaming platform known as Twitch. Now, Twitch recently decided to allow quote-unquote artistic nudity in response to the widespread trend of topless content gaining popularity. Which just sounds a little bit weird. It's like saying that these guys just decided to start allowing topless women. And instead of saying that this was done by the nerds for the nerds, they just said artistic nudity. As if the nerd that'll be watching it is going to be looking at it like, oh, this is an amazing piece of art. Nah, this guy is gonna be looking at it like titties.
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
I honestly can only think of one reason why these guys would decide to do this, and honestly it's just for the money. But you know what, let me try and read the caption to see if these guys had a much better explanation for this. So it says, and I quote, Twitch faced controversy when streamer Mogpie went viral for a seemingly topless broadcast, resulting in her ban. Responding to feedback, Twitch updated its sexual content guidelines on December the 13th. The changes permit labeled content that highlights specific body areas even when fully clothed. This adjustment aligns with Twitch acknowledging its previous disproportionate penalties for female-presenting streamers. Prohibited content like exposed body parts and certain dances is now allowed with labeling. Notably, streams labeled with sensitive themes won't feature on Twitch's homepage. Despite mixed responses, many viewers welcome these significant policy shifts on Twitch, especially regarding homepage content. End quote. So, in other words, like I said initially, this shit is all about the money. Because let's be particularly honest about something here. It's not like the gamers and the Twitch streamers were like, you know what, we don't want sexual content here anymore. Actually, I feel like the guys at Twitch actually realized that, whatever content that had this babe, what was her name? Mogpie, sorry. Going topless probably got a shit ton of streams and people donated money because on Twitch, like you're always donating money and shit. And they figured, this could be a good money maker. Because save for the shagging, it's not like this is too far off from live porn cams. Like, this is a situation where these guys saw that nerds would pay quite a bit of money to watch a babe topless on a Twitch stream, as opposed to, taking that money to like a live cam site, and they were like, you know what, we might as well take that money as well. Because whatever money is traded there, I'm sure the guys at Twitch usually get a certain amount of it. So, they decide to come and rebrand this entire thing under quote-unquote artistic nudity. And they talk about how they seem to discriminate a lot of women for how they dressed. And now they want to allow some of that shit. And the entire time I'm like, artistic nudity on Twitch? Like, that's like saying Christian porn. At the end of the day, even though there's people busy yelling hallelujah and there's a Bible there and someone dressed up like a priest, the fact that an altar boy is being fucked does not make it any better just because you've classified it as Christian porn. It's still porn. And there's no one who's sitting back there who's thinking, this will be good for me because I'm a Christian. Nah, like they're just in it for the porn. Just the same way this artistic nudity has been brought back for the sake of the nudity. But then again, considering that maybe I'm not a nerd and I don't entirely understand what artistic nudity is, I will leave it at that and start this podcast with a little bit more clothing, ready to cover up whatever bullshit I might be ready to spew and art in a much nicer way by saying, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, the podcast where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who's never spoken out against tits. This is the first time I'm doing it and it hurts, but I am doing this for a good cause. Like, take the titties back to the hub. He is a man who still believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This show has started on a slightly painful note because normally I do not speak against stuff that makes men happy, stuff that makes guys happy. Honestly, the way things are being sexualized left, right, and center, I feel like it's getting a little too much, and I do not want more broke nerds. Like, being a nerd can be a little bit hard for a lot of guys, but being a broke nerd is just the worst thing ever. But all in all, with that said, I do have a show that I have pretty well lined up, and it's a show that usually dives into the very interesting world of Twitter, goes to look into the mini tweets that people write, picks up a couple of tweets and breaks them down a little bit. Now, you can contribute to the making of these episodes by sending in the mini tweets that you see or the ones that you find that should be interesting enough for us to talk about. And the drill in doing that is particularly simple, regardless of whether you are on X or on Facebook or IG. And I'll explain that in a second, because it's a pretty simple drill, almost sounds like a song, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal X handle. On Facebook and on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot, a screen grab, if it ended up being copied from Twitter, or if it ended up on a reel, then the place to send it to on Facebook is @TheBreaktime Podcast, and on IG it is @TheBreaktime_podcast, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly. Now, I have a couple of tweets that I need to get into real quick, and they all kind of just talk about relationship stuff. But before I can get into any of that, I need to talk about nice guys for a bit. Now, I recently received a video on a woman who was busy talking about how nobody loses a woman faster than a nice guy, and usually the nice guys are the ones that will care a lot about the woman but end up being treated the worst and shit. And then later on, women never really realize how good they were until much later on after they've dropped them, blah blah blah. All in all, I feel like it's something that I'd covered before, but considering that maybe in the previous episode where I may or may not have covered it, someone probably didn't listen, and it was sent to me, I figured I might as well handle it. So without further ado,
nobody loses a woman faster than a man who really loves and cares about her. Women, what is our problem? I mean, you find a man is concerned about your well-being. Umefika home, umekula. Why do you look disturbed? You don't look good today. Have you applied for that job? Are you looking for jobs? Somebody who wants to be responsible, somebody who wants to be available in your life is that one person who you don't like, you disrespect, you feel like they're so obsessed and they are so desperate with you. What is wrong? Now, we love people who don't love us. Those who love us, we don't even care about them. In fact, we are busy working outside here, tainting their name. Now, you want the bad boy. And when I say bad boy, I don't mean your man, you know what I'm talking about. No, I mean these men who don't even care about her, the rough men. We want them. Now, when we get them, we start asking for qualities that were in this other man who was really loving us. What is wrong with us, ladies? What do we want? What kind of a man do we want? Because I think nowadays the question of who is your ideal man, it's like an examination, composition. You have to stay for 40 minutes and write 1.5 pages of the kind of a man you want. And when that good man, the man that when we were growing up we wanted to have, the man that would like our kids to have as a father, when they come into a life, we don't even care. In fact, we feel like they are becoming too much.
Okay. Actually, now that I've replayed the clip, whatever the hell I thought I was going to say initially might end up not even being said. The whole, why is it that women treat nice guys so poorly? There's a couple of reasons that I've seen, but the thing that normally gets to my core quite the most whenever I think about it is actually something that Jordan Peterson once said, where he spoke about how women like taming a monster. And normally, if you look at a lot of the fantasy books that appeal to women, it's usually some version of a monster that they're usually really, really interested in. And the whole idea of them taming that monster is particularly key. And, one of the best examples of that is Beauty and the Beast. There was this guy that was really trying to get, the main character who was a lady, but there was this beast of a man that was ferocious, but, would treat her nicely and would seem particularly tame when he was with her. And that kind of does put quite a lot of context. I also do tend to think that a lot of nice guys are sort of considered as weak or as pushovers because they're nice. just mostly because a lot of times they will bend over backwards to help someone else, and they will be very selfless, especially in terms of them trying to get the babe. They'll be particularly selfless. They will be willing to bend over backwards for the babe, and pun intended, it kind of might make them seem a bit spineless. Although also at the same time, there's always been that talk of women don't want to be put on a pedestal by default. They want to work their way into getting onto that pedestal. So if you're already putting on the pedestal such that, she's this top tier person that you're willing to give everything up for, you've already lost it because you've given it up too quickly. So essentially, as a guy, you're not supposed to be as nice, blah, blah, blah. Either way, for me, I've said for a very long time that I think most guys, especially when you're trying to hit on a babe that you really, really like, you need to consciously be a dick of sorts. Not that you treat her badly per se, but that you're willing to stand your ground and you will stick to your guns on something, so it shows that in as much as you may seem stubborn, you are someone that, stands on what they believe, stands on their principles, and that can make for a good leader. It can also make for someone that is worth trusting and someone that is worth getting behind, which, seems to be particularly attractive to quite a lot of women, or so I've been told. Either way, I honestly feel like there's a lot of women that, will obviously take a guy that treats them really nicely for granted. And unfortunate as that is, a lot of times those same women are the ones who will feel like they actually kind of missed out or they messed up after the guy's already moved on and found someone that actually appreciates them. Or it doesn't work that way and, shit happens and dude is still trying to be nice to the babe who isn't giving him shit. Either way, I want to leave it at that and sort of move things on and move on to the tweets for the episode. So, on to our very first tweet of this episode. Now, this tweet involves a video, a 1 hour 30-second video of a so-called relationship coach who claimed that any woman that claims to love a broke guy is lying. She's only with him because she hasn't seen a better replacement. Now, I have my thoughts on this entire thing, but before I can do that, I'd at least want to hear what the woman has to say first before I can say what I believe about the entire thing. So, without further ado...
You want to know the truth? Women will always go for men who provide for them. Women will always go for men who protect them if she doesn't feel safe with you. Women will always go for men who compliment them. Women will always go for men who are invested in a long-term relationship. Every woman wants to be married. They love to be married to the right person. So if you are a talker and not a doer, you are not for her. If you see any girl that is loving you now because you are broke, is a liar. The truth is, she has not seen your replacement. If someone comes into her life and shows her what it looks like to be taken care of by a man, you will be, even be option. Then go forgot her. And I'm not joking. Her survival instinct is stronger than her emotion of love. So when you tell a woman, I feel something for you, and she's not seeing it, it's not like say they do nursery rhymes, A, B, C, D. So feelings doesn't put food on the table. Feelings doesn't add value to the table. You are just a talker. Women will always go for men who do the work instead of the ones that talk the talk. You think loyalty is when somebody's with you when you're broke. You need help, my dear. Spiritual problem. Don't let anybody deceive you. Don't worry, baby. I like you like that. Is because they never jam. If they jam, they will leave you.
Okay. So, women love a provider. Women love a protector. Women love someone who compliments them and is looking forward to a long term. Okay, to be very honest, I can agree with the very first two bits she said about the provider protector. The one who compliments them very much, especially considering that I've just done the bit where, there's no guy that loses a woman faster than a nice guy. Nice guys compliment women all the time, but these women don't get to stick with them. Like, I don't know. I'd call that third point a little bit questionable. They want a man who is looking at the long term. That depends on where they are in life, because there's some women that are still pretty young and they aren't interested in getting married right now or in the next 5 years or maybe even in the next 10 years. So for you to start pulling one of those, they want someone long term, like, there's a bunch of babes that are just out here trying to date someone that they actually like and actually have a good thing, and they aren't even thinking that far. If you're talking like mid-20s going up, then maybe now you can bring it in, but you can't say that every woman is looking for a guy to do long-term with. But, assuming that probably her audience is people that are above the age of 24, then yes, maybe you could say that that's true. Now, the thing that I fully disagreed with was the whole thing of her talking about how, you think a woman is choosing to be with you because you're broke, you're wrong. Like, first of all, what woman chooses to be with a guy because he's broke? Like, I've heard of women choosing to be with guys because they're rich, because they're from some form of inherited wealth, they are, from a particularly good point in money, or they're financially stable. Broke usually isn't the thing that women are like, I want to date a broke man. Like, I usually don't hear that shit. Mostly because I know there's no woman who chooses to date a broke man because he's a broke man. If a babe is dating a broke man, it's because she sees the potential for the broke man to turn into a much richer guy, or at least a much more successful guy, and that could benefit her in the long run. Or at least, she can clearly see hope in the guy and she wants to be a part of that entire story. So that kind of makes sense. But the moment you start saying, you think your woman is with you because you're broke, come on, bruh. I would even think guys sit down and they're like, this babe is the absolute best because she's with me because I'm broke. Nah, the fact that she's with me when I'm broke means that when I do a hell of a lot better, then I can get to gift and I can make sure that her investment in me doesn't go to waste. That's actually how most guys will usually function. At least, the ones that are starting from the bottom and are going up. Now, when you kind of look at the whole idea of guys and being broke, personally, I feel like for the most part nowadays, guys are broke shamed so much. And in this particular part of the world, I feel like there's more broke shaming of men by women than there is fat shaming of women by men. But that's sort of besides the point. What I'm actually trying to get at is, I don't think there's any woman that's with a guy because he's broke, but at the same time, a lot of times people like to make it seem as though, she's only with a broke guy because the guy, who has more money, who can treat her better, hasn't come up yet. And the reality of it is, relationships are always a gamble. So for a lot of women, they can choose to date a guy who isn't balling like that because the guy that is on his grind will probably, or at least is expected to treat her a lot better as he's on his way up and when he gets to the top, as opposed to the guy that's already at the top that can possibly use her disposably. So that's a gamble that some might take. Some others might choose to go for the guy who has money because at least they're assured that he has a sense of stability. But at the end of the day, I don't think that just because you're not a guy who's at the top and you're still on your grind, you're still at the bottom, that your baby is going to leave you because there's another guy with more money. Like, that's not always the case. And also, if Shorty is with you because she's not pulling in other niggas, it's not like she's particularly loyal. She could just be ugly or just unable to attract dudes. Either way, if she's already started entertaining another guy trying to treat her better than you currently are, she's probably not loyal, so maybe you should give her the boot at that point. But for now, I think I'm just gonna leave it at that and move it on to our very next tweet, which is actually a pretty interesting question that I believe probably needs to be asked. So it says, and I quote, "Does tribe really matter when choosing a partner? Or is this toxicity that we got from our parents after trauma that they went through from a certain tribe?" End quote. Now, some people today, actually quite a lot of people today would say that tribe doesn't really matter. I'm of the opinion that it does, but not to the extent that our parents probably give it the weight that it does. Now, my reasoning for this is that culture is ingrained into people almost to a DNA type level. So to think that someone is not going to embody certain aspects and behaviors of their culture, and they're a part of this culture, this is something that they've grown up in more or less, then you'd most likely be wrong. Now, you don't necessarily have to have lived in a certain place and, interacted with those people, but the mere fact that your family is a part of that culture and will carry certain of those practices wherever it is that you go means that you will pick up certain character traits that are very particular of that, specific tribe. So, for example, say the aggression that comes with women that are from matriarchal tribes might mean that, the babe that you're dealing with who's from that particular tribe might actually, either one of you has to back down or you'll have issues in, the leadership of the home. So those are things that you probably need to look out for. But at the same time, I also understand that it doesn't carry as much weight because at the end of the day, in as much as, yes, culture is a part of us, and the cultures that our parents came from and the cultures that we've grown up in are a part of us, at the end of the day, considering that a lot of us have been brought up in places where it's been a mixture of cultures, it's been a very diverse landscape. So for example, a city area like Nairobi, places like Nakuru, Mombasa, and so on, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have carried nothing but your culture and you've dumped it into that place. There's new practices and behaviors that will be picked up when you're a part of that diverse area that will probably suit you or suit someone else. And at the end of the day, your partner's individual values and character traits, as well as the families, are definitely going to carry a little bit more weight. But you can't say that tribe shouldn't have any consideration behind the entire thing, because at the end of the day, this is someone who is from a particular tribe. That tribe will have cultural behaviors and cultural norms which have been practiced for years and decades, probably even centuries. So if your partner exhibits them, it's not like they came out of the blues. It's just a part of who they are. Although then again, if you look at a lot of the intermarriage, that does tend to kind of skew things. So, at the end of the day, it is still going to be a toss-up in terms of weight. So I am going to leave it at that and move things on to our very final tweet of this episode. Now, this was actually a tweet that was in response to another tweet which said, and I quote, "I am a millionaire. If you think I'm getting married without a prenup, then you are insane or naive. I trust God, I will trust my wife will trust me. Neither of us will trust the government." End quote. Now, the person who responded to this tweet said, and I quote, "If you truly trust your wife, you don't need a prenup. And if you don't fully trust your would-be wife, marrying them is a bad idea. The nature of marriage is until death do us part. A prenup says otherwise." End quote. Now, when I kind of read this, it kind of did take me back to when the whole prenup talk was like a really big thing this year, which was, I think, around March, if I'm not wrong, which was around the same time, the very infamous and monumental story of Ashraf Hakimi and his fortune, and the whole thing about his wife expecting to get half of it, but instead having to split half of hers because his fortune was pretty much under his mother's name, which was an incredibly monumental and super interesting story. Personally, one of the most interesting ones I've heard of this entire year. And to be very honest, like when people were busy talking about the prenup at that time, it was for a lot of women who were busy trying to secure themselves. And the whole idea of the prenup, so that you can know what it is that he owns and what's under his name, blah blah. And the whole details of getting a prenup is something that a lot of people are busy talking about. And honestly, during that time, I feel like it became a big issue because the women actually saw a situation where they could lose a bunch of their wealth if they do not sign a prenup with a man. And of course, as a result, it became this talking point. So people were like, oh, a prenup is necessary. Oh, people should go for a prenup. Now, personally speaking, I think I am not on the whole, I'm super religious and I'm going to stick with my wife through thick and thin. Not that I don't want to do that, but I am very pro prenup is essentially what I'm trying to say. And I'm not saying it because I look forward to the end of my possible would-be marriage to my possible would-be wife. I'm just seeing it as a good option so that people can know at least what it is that they stand to gain or lose should the relationship, or should I say, should the marriage end. Now, of course, at the end of the day, if someone's looking at it as a payday, there's nothing that you can really do about that. But all in all, the way I see it, if you're a person with a lot of wealth, it helps you secure a good chunk of that wealth. And if, for example, you're the mother who is going to be having the kids and you're giving your prime years to this man so that you can give him children and, possibly raise them, which might mean you staying off of work, then you can also get some sort of compensation, as some prenup contracts have actually shown. But all in all, I feel like if you take this, it at least tells you that, we want the marriage to stay for as long as possible, but just in case it doesn't, we have this. And at the same time, you can use it to reinforce the whole idea of having, regular reviews of the marriage. The whole, after every so often, maybe after a year or 3 years or 5 years, you sit down with your partner and you're like, all right, so we've been doing this for about this much time. Are there some things that you don't like? Are there some things that you like? Is there something that you'd want us to do, and blah, blah. So that you can at least look at your relationship from a point of growth and improvement, not just from a place of we're going to love each other and be happy, until happily ever after or some shit. Honestly, I feel like it's a smart move. I think that it should be necessary for a lot of people. But of course, there's someone who's going to be out there saying, why the hell are you discussing prenups and you're even broke? What do you have to hold on to in the name of wealth? And I'd probably be like, you know what, you're right. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it. Although, then again, I just sound salty at this point, so I'm going to leave it at that. But I want your thoughts on it. On X, or is it Twitter, it is at BagakaTheD. On Facebook, it is at The Break Time Podcast. And on IG, it is at The Break Time _podcast. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.